In the Bible, men made predictions and people expected them to come true. Why can't climate scientists be more like Christians? Today on The 10th Man. Every year on the Sunday of Epiphany, Catholics, Anglicans, and other Christians celebrate the visit of the Magi, the three wise men, to the Christ child in Bethlehem. In the second chapter of Matthew, it says that wise men from the east came to Jerusalem after Jesus was born and asked Herod the king where they might find him. The king summoned the priests and teachers and asked them this question, to which they replied, Bethlehem. So the wise men went to Bethlehem, and there was baby Jesus. The wise men went to Jerusalem to ask where Jesus was, got an answer, and acted on it. Everyone present accepted that the prophecy would be correct, no quibbling, no probabilities, and no doubts, and no correction later. You can reject the accuracy of this account, but that is moot. The veracity of the Bible has been debated despite its having been accepted by non-believers at the time, and despite its being supported by the existence and study of thousands of manuscripts. It's a book unlike any other, but you can still reject it if you'd like, because the importance of this story is not what you think of the Bible, it's what believers then thought, which is a lesson for everybody. Believers today and in the past will let you question and doubt and gladly debate the Bible with you because they will stand by the statements made by the Lord's prophets. The leaders of Jerusalem opened the scriptures, saw what it said, passed it on to the wise men, and everyone acted on it with no doubt that it was true. There's no, they were right at the end. It's not mentioned again. It's just a normal event. In the Old Testament, when God's communication was largely through human prophets, he laid out the guidelines early in the ancient book of Deuteronomy. False prophets should be put to death, and one who predicted an event which did not come to pass, he was a false prophet. There are and have been false prophets in the church. They're the same kind of people working in the climatist church today. They made predictions about the end of the world in order to secure a following and to gain power, prestige, and money. Back when the church was the center of power, the false prophets sprang up in the church. Now that politics concentrates in the sciences, the same type of charlatans goes there. Founders of some well-known religions illustrate this. William Miller was a 19th century Baptist minister who decided the world was going to end, giving the date of March 1843, then changing it to sometime in 1843. He didn't offer his life if he was wrong, but admitted that he should be ostracized. When the year passed, he gave a new date of March 1844, then changed that to October. He died in 1849, violating the first rule of biblical prophets: don't make predictions of major events to occur before your own death. Charles Russell, another Christian minister, predicted the end of the world in 1878. He and his church also predicted the world would end in 1881, 1914, 1918, 1925, and the one that I remember, 1975. Finally, they said they knew for sure that it would end with the 20th century. They were wrong again and again, but kept their following. Remind you of any contemporary events? If you want to start your own powerful church like these men, stay with me until the end and I'll tell you what the next big end-of-the-world date for Christians is. It's not too far off, and with that clue, you could probably guess it. There have been many end-of-the-world scenarios in the church. The cartoon of an old man carrying a sign saying, "The end is near," was a meme of my youth, poking fun at these people. The end of the world has been predicted by minor figures, medium ones, and major ones like Martin Luther. But the two biggest lessons of biblical prophecy, valid today, are these. God's prophets did not predict immediate doom and set themselves up as leaders of a new church to capitalize on it. They lived, prophesied, and generally died in poverty before the events came to pass. Second, and you may not accept it even though it's the bravest prophecy ever made, Jesus said that no man will ever correctly predict the end of the world. That's a bold statement because it's timeless. And so far, 2,000 years later, this prophecy has been challenged hundreds of times, and it's still correct. Climatists, pay attention. Predicting the end of the world is a part of the human condition, not unique to American Christianity. The Japanese church Aum Shinrikyo believed the world was ending in 1997 and killed people outside its group. But it is not just religions that predict the end of the world. Around 1350, the Black Death was interpreted as a sign of the world's end. In 1499, a German mathematician and astronomer predicted the world would be destroyed by flood in 1524. That gave people 20 years to prepare, and one man built an ark, with the result that crowds rioted to board when the day came. No doubt they stripped the stores of toilet paper on their way to the riot. Incidentally, there was no flood. In fact, that year was a drought. So much for ancient climate change predictions. In 1654, the end was predicted based on a nova. John Napier, the mathematician and early computer scientist, made a prediction in 1688 based on his calculations. Various predictions were made based on comets, including the Heaven's Gate tragedy of 1997, which ended several lives, along with a line of Nike running shoes. With the Age of Enlightenment, you'll notice the prophets of doom moved away from a religious basis for their authority and more into the scientific area, or a combination of the two. Take, for example, the predictions around Halley's Comet, which returned to visit Earth in 1910. The British and Irish proclaimed that the comet indicated a coming invasion by Germany. In France, they blamed Halley's for disastrous climate change in the flooding of the Seine flowing through Paris. But the greatest impact came from the Yerkes Observatory in Chicago. Scientists there said that they had discovered poisonous gas in the tail of the comet. It was known that the Earth would pass through the comet's tail on the night of May 18th and 19th, and a French astronomer said it could snuff out all life. The announcements were made in February, and there was plenty of time to induce panic and plenty of time for charlatans to create an anti-comet vaccine and sell protective masks. Truthfully, they sold pills and masks, but not an actual vaccine. When May 18th arrived, some people took refuge in sealed safe rooms they had created. Some committed suicide. Some gathered to pray, and some got drunk, preferring to be unconscious when death arrived. And there were some who trusted God's word that only He knew when the earth was to be destroyed, and they had comet parties that night. Actually, they did not have to believe in God. They only had to disbelieve all the self-appointed experts who said they knew what was going to happen. And we could use more of that today. Because today, with climate change, the problem is not that I don't believe it. The problem is that the scientists don't. In 1975, same year the Russellites thought the world was going to end, scientists predicted the world would end by global cooling. Nowadays, they backtrack and say global cooling was just one man's opinion. Except there are dozens of theories going around today which are one man's opinion, and politicians bounce from one to another as long as they support the dogma. Or worse, they bring indigenous people and Swedish teenage girls before us to speak, like Herod brought the priests before the wise men, as if foreign people have magic insight into the ways of the planet. I've said it before, I don't have data to prove or disprove their case. If they want us to listen to them about climate change, gun control, and COVID, or any other doctrines, they need to show their data. They need to be consistent, and they need to be right. In my lifetime alone, the world gets nicer, safer, cleaner, and healthier. Yet prophets of doom have predicted calamity through fire, flood, pandemic, sunspot activity, acid rain, dioxin, ketone, ozone holes, black holes, communism, killer bees, and the Gang of Four. Ellen Kelsey, an environmental communicator, points out, We have media ratings to protect children from sex or violence in movies, but we think nothing of inviting a scientist into a second-grade classroom and telling the kids the planet is ruined. A quarter of children are so troubled by the state of the world that they honestly believe it will come to an end before they get older." End quote. Here's my prediction for the next end of the world date. Actually, there will be more than one date because they'll get it wrong, just like they got Y2K wrong. So here's what's going to happen. Just as the apocalypse was predicted in the year 2000, someone is going to realize that the 2000th anniversary of the Lord's death is approaching. Jesus started his ministry at age 30 and was crucified 3 years later. Somebody's going to predict the world's end based on the 2000th anniversary of his death in 2034. Except that they'll be 4 years too late because all the calendars are wrong and scholars believe he died in 2030. Of course, as the Lord said, no one knows the day or the hour, so my advice to you is to ask for proof of any apocalyptic predictions and remember the Lord's sacrifice every day and twice on Sunday. Thank you for listening.